Hey everyone, Mr. Mase here. This is a guide for round 7 of the 2021 FIA Nations Cup taking place at Willow Springs Big Willow with the Red Bull Junior. Let's get this started. For this lap guide, we are using sports soft tires and we have the brake balance at -1. And your first braking point is the end of the shadow before the 50-meter board. Use a small burst of braking and ease off of the brakes as you turn in. Try not to touch too much of the sand and carry as much speed as possible because this first turn can shave off a lot of time by itself. This second turn can be taken flat out, just don't turn in too much, otherwise the car will start to understeer and you'll start to lose speed. Just keep it nice and tidy, bring yourself towards the right, brake before you reach the 50-meter board, brake hard for a short moment, slowly ease off of the brakes as you turn in, trying to make sure that you hit the apex and carefully apply the throttle so the car doesn't step out too much. Lots of throttle control as you go through the top part of the track and use a little bit of braking if necessary. Just try to hit the apex and get on the throttle as soon as you can. Then bring yourself all the way to the right, dipping half of the car onto the sand, and your next braking point is just before the curb on the right ends. Small burst of braking, just be nice and careful getting on the throttle, and you can go down to 3rd gear if you need a bit more power, or stay on 4th gear if you need a bit more stability. Then the final turns here at Big Willow can be taken flat out due to this car's downforce. You just need to set yourself up just right and have the right angle for it to carry the maximum speed possible. So turn in at the 50-meter board, or slowly turn in at the 150-meter board, and just try to get the right angle so you can get really close to the apex without actually hitting it, and try to have the best angle possible so you can carry as much speed. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time, which means that you'll get around 3 to 4 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible. And because the Red Bull Junior is a high downforce car, and due to these different types of turns here at Big Willow, you actually want to qualify by yourself. And also, your qualifying lap starts pretty early during your out lap. Your quote-unquote qualifying lap starts as soon as you go through this left turn, so just as you're starting to go down the hill, this is where your actual qualifying lap is going to start, because you need to carry as much speed as possible, especially through the final turn, which will help you set your pace when you start your first qualifying lap. So going back to what I was saying before, dirty air is a thing with these cars, so while it'll help the car go a bit faster as you're going through the main street or the back straight leading to the final turn, you have these medium and high speed turns that's actually going to end up hurting the car if you're within someone's slipstream or the dirty air, so your car will end up understeering, or worse, be prone to starting to slide around because you're on the sports soft tires or sports medium tires in the race. So your car is going to be more prone to sliding around, and yeah, you're just going to want to qualify by yourself. Qualify pretty much as far away from everyone as you can, because this is more about trying to be precise with your inputs, is trying to nail down every single turn, trying to carry as much speed as possible without getting interrupted. And that precision is going to be ultra important for a combination like this, especially with the Red Bull Juniors, as making even a small mistake can cost you quite a bit of time. So if your car just started to slide around just a little too much, well, guess what? You just lost 0.4 of a second. And yeah, it's going to get really annoying, especially if you've been trying it in the time trial. You make a little mistake and suddenly you just lost half a second. So you're going to want to try to make sure you're able to nail all these turns so you can shave off as much time as possible, carry as much speed, and keep your laps nice and tidy. So let's say that you're finishing up a qualifying lap, or you happen to make a huge mistake, you completely bend it, and you still have time to get an out lap done and then start another qualifying lap. So what you can do, instead of having to go all the way around, you can simply do the jump out and jump back in method. So once again, after you do qualifying lap or if you mess up, press options, exit, and in the lobbies you press enter course, or during the actual FIA race day itself you press the qualifying button. So you'll spawn back at the pit stop with a new set of tires, and all you need to do now is just do another out lap and then another qualifying lap, once again providing that you had enough time to clear the out lap first. And this will be especially useful in case you bin it, or if you're doing a qualifying lap and someone gets in your way because they made a mistake and you end up getting too close to them. So that will be there in case you need it. And at the end of the day, you have 2 to 4 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible, qualify alone, and just try to nail down every single input, nail down every single turn. For this race, we are doing 23 laps at Willow Springs Big Willow with the Red Bull Junior. This is a grid start, so bring your traction control to 1, and shortly after the race starts, you can then bring it back down to 0 or whatever value you normally have it set to. And before I talk about the strategies, I do want to highlight that this race is difficult. You're in a Red Bull Junior car that is on sports tires, so the car is going to be pretty slidey at Big Willow, which means that any small mistake could mean that you're going to end up flying into space or building sandcastles. And you have all this dirty air, which means that your car is going to be super understeery as you go through some of the medium and higher speed turns. And did I mention that you're on sports soft tires and sports medium tires? Because yeah, you're on sports tires for the Red Bull Junior, so the car is going to be pretty slidey. So put all this together and you get this nightmare of a combination. So it's going to take a lot of time to try to get a good idea of how to drive these cars, especially under the race settings. And you'll also need to find out how to drive these cars when you're under someone's dirty air. So whenever you're within 3/4 of a second behind someone, you're engaging with the dirty air, so it'll help your car go faster on the main and back straight. But once you have to go through the medium and higher speed turns, that's where the dirty air gets really feisty and it's going to make your car really understeery. So whenever you're going through the high speed turns, so let's say the final turn and this turn right here, so turn 2, and you're under someone's dirty air, you're within 3/4 of a second behind someone, you just want to lift off our throttle, just slow down just a little bit so your car can actually make the turn and you don't end up building sandcastles. And you'll also need to be even more careful once the tires start to wear out and when you're on the sports medium tires, as the car is going to be even more prone to start to slide around because the rear tires wear out a bit faster than the front tires, and you especially need to keep an eye on the rear left tire, as that's the tire that's going to be taking the most beating out of all 4 tires. So basically, whenever you're under someone's dirty air, your car's tires are starting to wear out, which is around lap 7 and on if you're on the soft tires. And whenever you're on the sports medium tires, you want to be a bit more careful about how you approach these turns. And for the most part, it's just go a tad bit slower, lift off the throttle a bit, and for the most part, the car shouldn't act up. And the risky thing about this combination is that you need to carry as much speed as possible to try to get the best times possible or to have a really good pace. But the thing is that, if you saw just now, if you mess up, if you make a little mistake, you're going to end up building sandcastles. So there's a really high risk and reward to this race, and you're going to see that in this race I actually took it really safe because I only ended up getting a 112 once in this entire race because I was just trying to keep this stupid car on the track. And for most people, I think that's going to be the goal of this race, is to just try to keep the car on the track. If you can do that, then chances are you're already going to get a pretty good result. But semi-rant aside, fuel is a ×5, so fuel is actually not an issue. Part of that because this car is super light. It only weighs 1,000 pounds, so it's pretty fuel efficient. Tower is a ×13, so tower is an issue even though we're on sports tires. And we are given the sports soft and medium tires, but only the sports medium tires are required for this race. So you do have to use the sports medium tires for at least one lap, so you don't get a 1 minute penalty after the race ends. And with the tower being pretty high, the sports soft tires will last anywhere from 10 to 12 laps, although you'll see most people pit at the end of laps 11 or 12. It'll mostly come down to how much the rear left tire is wearing out, since that's pretty much the indicator of when you'll need to pit, or if you can stay out for just a bit more. And you'll see why right now, as the car is going to start to slide around because the rear left tire has already taken a beating. And yeah, you have to be really careful with these worn tires and these sports medium tires, so you don't end up sliding around, because if you start to even just slide around just a little bit, guess what, you just lost a bunch of time. So once again, between laps 10 to 12, those are going to be the times when you're going to see most of the people pit. And this is just for a tire change. Fuel is not an issue. So assuming you're starting in the very front, start on the sports soft tires, but if you're starting closer towards the middle or the back of the pack, start on the sports medium tires, especially since you'll have to be dealing with the dirty air. And pit loss is actually going to be a little short. So assuming you're only pitting for tires, which is what you should be doing, your pit loss is going to be around 10 seconds. So this does bring the question of whether the two-stop is actually viable or not, and I'm going to quickly say that it is not that viable. The thing is that when you pit for tires, you've already used up half of your fuel. So you can see on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, I've used up around 50% of fuel. So the car is going to be a bit lighter, which means that I can go a bit faster. And because I can go a bit faster, my lap times on the sports medium tires are going to be a bit closer to my lap times on my sports soft tires from my first stint. And I'll show my lap times side to side right now, so you see my soft and medium stint times. They're pretty close, except the only outlier is the one at lap 10, where I was magically able to get a 1:12.7. But other than that, your lap times, they're going to be rather close to each other, but a lot of it's going to also depend on how fast you're taking these turns, because I find it that it's a little easy to be inconsistent here with this combination, because even just the tiniest errors can cost you a couple tenths of a second, so do keep that in mind. But for the most part, the lap times between your soft and medium tires, they're going to be a bit closer together than usual. And of course, this will depend on whether you make any mistakes or if someone gets in your way. But for the most part, your lap times will be around 4/10 to 8/10 of a second apart from each other, which is not going to be enough to be able to cover the second pit loss from a second pit stop. And because we have a 10-second pit loss, you basically need to have the lap time differences between those tires be a little over a second per lap from each other. So I would even say 1.5 seconds per lap from each other for the two-stop to even be viable. But in this case, it's less than a second, even 4/10 of a second per lap apart, depending on how you take these turns. So for the most part, yeah, the two-stop is not going to be that viable. So at the end of the day, this is a one-stop race, pit halfway into the race, so laps 10, 11, or 12. And if you're starting on the sports soft tires, do 10 to 12 laps, switch on over to the sports medium tires. And if you're starting on the sports medium tires, basically same thing, 10 to 12 laps on the sports medium tires, and then switch on over to the sports soft tires. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. But I do want to note that a lot of these times where you're going to be overtaking people is going to be when they're messing up or if they're just going way too slow through a turn. So be aware that any, regular overtaking is going to be extremely difficult due to the track layout and the dirty air that these cars generate. But anyways, places to overtake and the penalty serving zone, let's get this started. The main straight, there is a penalty serving zone that is hanging out right over here. So if you have a penalty to serve, you'll be serving it there. This is also one place where it is possible to get an overtake done, but be careful about how you take the first turn, as if you lose a lot of speed, then that can open up for others to take advantage of you. After that, it's pretty much going to be a single file line for a while. It'll depend if the cars in front of you mess up or not, and if they do, you can try to take advantage of them, because even the smaller mistakes can cost them quite a bit of time. This is another spot where a lot of mistakes can be made, so you can take advantage of people. Just try to swing on by and hopefully not get tangled with their incidents. And the final penalty serving zone is hanging out right over here on the back straight. And if the car in front of you messed up at the start of the back straight, then pretty much this back straight is your last opportunity to get overtake done before you have to go through the final turn, in which you need to approach this with caution, especially if you're under the dirty air, have worn tires, or on the sports medium tires. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this race. This is going to be a one-stop race simply for a tire change, and just try to stay on the track as much as you can. So try not to make too many mistakes, don't slide around, and be careful with the dirty air. And yeah, this race is pretty cursed, and this race had me swearing like a sailor. But anyways, that is all from me. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. CA, tired of this cursed combination, and I'll see you in the next video.